Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the 24th Annual Mary Ellen and Jim Wayne Miller Celebration of Writing. We're so pleased that you can be with us today, though we certainly miss gathering together in person and look forward to when we can do that again. We are glad to be able to gather via this virtual platform to share and celebrate writing. This year, we're also delighted to co-sponsor the event with the WKU African American Studies program. Oops, it's how about now? Okay. I had been unmuted, so I'm going to give my spiel again, just in case anybody didn't hear it. Welcome, everyone, to the 24th Annual Mary Ellen and Jim Wayne Miller Celebration of Writing. We're so pleased that you can be here with us today. We certainly miss gathering together in person, and we look forward to being able to do that again next year. But we're glad to be able to do it at least via this virtual platform today to share and celebrate writing. This year, we're delighted to co-sponsor the event with the WKU African American Studies program. I'm Dr. Allison Langdon, the new department head of English here at WKU. I stepped into this role in January when our former department head, Dr. Rob Hale, moved into a new position in the provost office as associate provost for faculty and academic excellence. Because Rob deeply loved Mary Ellen, and because we love him, even though he abandoned us, we asked him to kick off the event and to announce the 10 finalists of this year's poetry writing contest. Just a quick note before we get started, to minimize distractions and save bandwidth, folks could please keep cameras off and mics muted. And now, welcome Rob Hale.
Thanks, Allison. It's great to see your faces, even if it was just for a minute there. I really can't express what an honor it is to be asked by my colleagues to participate in this event. I get sentimental at these moments, as they know, and I'll try to keep it together today. But as you know, I'll probably fail at that. For 21 years, Mary Ellen Miller organized the Jim Wayne Miller Celebration of Writing to honor the work of a renowned husband. Author of many volumes, including Copperhead Cane, The Mountains Have Come Closer, and Briar, his book, Jim Wayne Miller has been called the great ambassador for Appalachian literature. For 21 years, Mary Ellen Miller nurtured her husband's literary legacy, which culminated in the production of Every Leaf a Mirror, the Jim Wayne Miller Reader, co-edited with Morris Grubbs, and in Dr. Miller's posthumous induction into the Kentucky Writers Hall of Fame in 2015. Mary Ellen Miller was a professor of English at WKU for over 53 years, the longest serving faculty member in WKU's history. She played a pivotal role in developing creative writing as a minor, a major, and a graduate emphasis within the English department. And in 2015, she became a founding member of WKU's outstanding MFA in creative writing faculty. In addition to her record-breaking decades of teaching and service to the university, Mary Ellen was an accomplished poet and editor. Her collection, The Poet's Wife Speaks, won the Old 70 Creek Press Prize in 2011. With Morris Allen Grubbs, she won a Weatherford Award for Every Leaf a Mirror, dubbed one of the best books on Appalachian culture for 2015. In 2017, President Gary Ransdell designated her as WKU's first university poet laureate. While Jim Wayne Miller's work and legacy will continue to be a central part of the annual festivities, 2 years ago, for reasons that are now quite obvious, we rechristened this important event to honor both partners in this dynamic duo. So I'd like to welcome you to the 24th Annual Mary Ellen and Jim Wayne Miller Celebration of Writing. Now, if we were together at this point, you would clap. So if you want to do those little clapping icons there, you can. If you'd rather not, that's okay too. Before we start, or before we roll further along, typically we try to recognize members of the Miller family if they're here. And I heard Ruth might be here. I heard Fred and Lynn might make it. So if you're out there, if you want to like undo your camera for a second so we can see you, that'd be cool. Hey, how's it going? Glad you're here.
Great, happy to be here. Happy to see everybody and be here for the event.
Thanks. This is Mary Ellen's grandson. So thanks for being here, Jim.
Thank you, Rob. Hey, Jim, this is the only time we ever see each other, so
Hey,
thank you
Ruth.
for creating a family reunion. That's not the intent of this, but thank you for organizing.
You bet. We're glad you guys are here. So for the past 23 events, the celebration has shined the spotlight on three things: student writers, the guest workshop, and the guest writer and the workshop leader, and writing itself. And this year won't be an exception. But before we kind of move into the normal things, I hope you'll indulge me and allow me to say a few more words about Mary Ellen, because whenever I get a chance to say a few words about Mary Ellen, I always do, especially in light of this strange environment we find ourselves in. I only got to work with Mary Ellen for about 5 years, and it took us about a year to get used to each other. So we only had about 4 tight years together, and they were pretty tight years. Whenever I talk about her, I always mention laughter because we laughed a lot together. Mostly we laughed at each other. One of the things I regularly mocked her about, of the many things, was her struggle with technology. She wasn't great with computers, and I would jokingly tell people that she made me type up her annual report for her every year. It really wasn't a joke, though. I did that sometimes. I'm intrigued thinking about how she might fathom this very old school event that's so enshrined in rituals and traditions being held on computer screens. I don't think she'd like it, but I think she'd get over it, as she always did. And sometimes, those of you who knew her, it would take her a while to get over things, but she would get over it, because she wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to celebrate the work of our fine student writers, and she wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to celebrate the fine work of Joy Priest. She wouldn't miss the refreshments, though, and especially she would miss the wine. So in that spirit, I brought my own glass of wine, and I'll raise a glass to Mary Ellen and Jim, to our 10 student finalists, and to Ms. Priest. Cheers. As most of you know, our 10 writers were selected from a larger pool of contestants to participate in a workshop this morning with our guest writer. These finalists are now a part of the history of creative writing at WKU and have joined the ranks of writers going back into the 1990s. I'm very happy to recognize these 10 folks as finalists for the Mary Ellen and Jim Wayne Miller Celebration of Writing Contest. And so when I say your name, go ahead and unmute your camera, show us your face, and so we can see you, and I'll just go through the list. So our first finalist is Ella Corder. The poem that Corder wrote is Self-Conscious Dante in the Middle of the Journey of Our Life. I Came to Myself in a Dark Wood. The next finalist is Nia Queen Douglas. The poem Redbird. Next finalist is Eli Edens and the poem I Have My Mother's Handwriting. The next poet, Summer Gary, Getting to Know Your Neighbors During Quarantine. The next one, Faith Harris, Looking Back to You. Kelly Lingen, Practice. Abigail Rayleigh, I Called Thomas. Chloe Skeese, House on 1016. Kayla Spears, The Stroke. And Gabby Wilson, How Does That Make You Feel, Eeyore? So in just a few minutes, Dr. Langdon will introduce Joy Priest, who will announce the winners of this year's prizes. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. Following in the tradition of David Lee, who hosted this event for years and years, at this point, we normally make a joke about the ritual where we alert students that the winner's envelopes are not filled with fat, juicy wads of cash, but instead contain sterile photocopies of W-9s from the IRS. This year, we can't even offer you the W-9, but fear not, the English department will contact you shortly with information about how to get paid. Speaking of getting paid, the celebration is brought to you through generous support of donors who fund the prizes, and in a normal year, delicious refreshments and the already mentioned wine. Over the years, Mary Ellen insisted that copious amounts of food and drink be served at this celebration, and that the English department had to find a way to pay for it. So we hope you'll help us out. Now comes my shameless pitch to ask you to help us pay, not only for future wine and refreshments, but also for the prizes and for the future workshop leaders by supporting the Mary Ellen and Jim Wayne Miller Celebration Fund. Please help us keep Mary Ellen and Jim Wayne's legacies alive and help us support great writing in the Commonwealth. I'm going to put details in the chat box in a second. So if you want to click on that link, it'll take you to the WKU page where you can make a contribution if you'd like. So that's all I've got for now. I'll hand it back over to Allison.
Thank you so much, Rob. One of the things that is so special about this event is the opportunity to engage with the vibrant community of writers in Kentucky. Today, I am honored to introduce the poet Joy Priest, author of Horsepower, just published last month by University of Pittsburgh Press and selected by US Poet Laureate Natasha Trethewey as the winner of the Donald Hall Prize for Poetry. Of Horsepower, Trethewey writes, "Undergirding these poems is a restless, resilient spirit, an urgent grappling with the desire to both remember and outrun the past, with history both personal and communal, and the complexities of American racism in its most intimate manifestation, familial love." Hailing from Louisville, Kentucky, Ms. Priest has an MFA from the University of South Carolina and is now completing her doctorate in literature and creative writing at the University of Houston. And I'm going to really quickly put a link to her book in chat there too. Normally we would have a wonderful table with copies of the books to purchase, but of course we can't do that. So you can track down one that way. Joy led a workshop for our finalists this morning, and now we'll announce the 3 winners and then share with us some of her wonderful poetry. Please welcome Joy Priest.
Hello, everyone. Hello, family. I'm just deeply honored to have been asked to be the speaker for this year. Even more honored now that I've spent a little time with everyone today, and I realize how rich the writing community is here. I always say, like, we're known for bourbon, basketball, and horses, but the writing legacy, which isn't talked about as much, is maybe richer than any of those other things. So when Allison just said that, I didn't realize she was gonna introduce me. She was using that to introduce me. That's funny. So I had just a wonderful time with the 10 writers this morning. They're very brilliant and very gracious to one another. You can tell they're familiar with one another's work, and they really appreciate writing with one another. And it was just really refreshing to be with them. I also want to say to them that if you finalize for a prize, you've already won. Like, you're a winner. Your poems are winners. Anything beyond that is just sort of the subjective, excruciating deliberation of the judge. So I hope that you all feel that you are poets worth your salt. Should I go first place to third place or third place to first place?
Usually we go third place to first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just say a little bit about why I chose each one. This next, the third place poem I chose for not only its urgency of subject matter and the great potential that the poem has to be more poems and to be, to have a future, but also for the incredible use of extended metaphor in the poem. And that goes to Nia Douglas for Redbird. I can't hear you, Nia. Did you want to say something?
I didn't know if I was supposed to say anything, but yay. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us. For second place, I chose the poem for its original take on and brilliant use of conceit for an important and nuanced topic. That was Eli Eden's poem, I Have My Mother's Handwriting.
Thank you.
And for first place, also I want to say again, like, these selections are I mean, there's so many reasons I could have chosen poems for. I mean, there was so much brilliant use of form and rigor of form that I saw throughout, and originality. I just really showed my overall sort of decision making was around like just delight and risk. That it seemed that the poet was enjoying themselves and taking risk and being original and that sort of thing. But again, this was across the board, so it was really tough. This poem really stood out to me for its intelligence and lyricism and knowledge of literature and engagement with other literature and other writers. And that is Ella's poem, Self-Conscious Dante.
Geez, are you sure? Oh, wow.
Ella, you're going to need to send me a copy of that as your Dante professor. So
It is your fault, so I will. Thanks.
They get to read their poems? I don't know. But yeah, so those are my selections, but I loved everyone's poems. This is my second, no, not my second time, but my second time this year being a judge, and it's just, it's so tough. I actually just realized that I left my book in the other room because I was kind of going through it between on the break. So if I can just run and grab that really quick, I will return in just a second. I apologize for that.
while Joy is doing that, I just want to add my congratulations to all of the finalists and especially to the winners. Thank you so much for participating. It was great to have all the submissions that we received this year, and we're just delighted to be able to celebrate your writing.
Okay, so I wasn't really sure how long I was supposed to read or speak, so I just thought that I might read for about 20 minutes, and then we can maybe do a Q&A if that's fine.
That would be great.
Okay. I'm just gonna kind of give you a tour through the book in the way that it's laid out. The book begins with the title poem Horsepower, which is kind of, I guess I'm thinking about it, you know, sort of as, I think I used to call it like the proscenium poem, but I guess it would be like the prologue poem. I don't know what people call these things, but it sort of starts before the book starts, before the epigraph and everything else. So Horsepower. Off season, before the racetrack opens, I jump through the threshold of my back door stable side. A dove takes off from its nest tucked into the corner of the porch awning, glides through my world, which I can see in its entirety from my top step. A horse practicing its start out of the gate. Only Longfield, that avenue rounding the perimeter of the pill-shaped track where the red and white and green flags ripple from balconies, and my neighbors sell horchata in styrofoam cups, street tacos, and paper baskets with cilantro and lime. Only Longfield and a chain-link fence separates the horse's air from mine. They work the loop of that circular mile, making everyone's living except their own the motors of our economy. Beyond the spires is a larger world I do not know exists. A mile west in my line of vision is a family I do not know I have. In that corner of the city, separating from the land like a cell in mitosis, straining across the Ohio River to the north, my great aunt, Black matriarch, rocks on her blue porch, and my father, just a couple of blocks away from her, coos my baby brother into sleep while his new wife flowers the wings of a flightless bird. But all I know for now is my grandfather, the white one, And I know my mother, who I can hear now roaring home from work in her muscle car. And wait, I know the horses and their restless mind. So I grew up across the street from Churchill Downs, where they run the Kentucky Derby every year. And I guess that's important to know for the first half of the poems I will read. And then sort of the second half goes into the later part of the speaker's adolescence when she moves. I'm sort of going in and out of my subjectivity in the speakers here, but where she moves to in with her father's family in West Louisville. So if you know anything about Louisville, you know it's pretty segregated. One of the most segregated city in the country after Detroit, Milwaukee, and Cleveland. But the area around Churchill Downs was kind of this mixed working class white and Black neighborhood and Mexican or Latino population, which was also in close proximity to Americana. If you know about Louisville, you also know it's a refugee city. So it was, so there's this transition from that space into Black Louisville, West Louisville, and the speaker's later adolescence. I also want to say thank you to the Miller family. I forgot to mention them. Thank you so much for sponsoring this and for having me as the speaker. So I'll jump from that prologue poem to the second section, the very first poem that opens the second section. The year I was born, a filly won the Kentucky Derby. And so her name is the title of the poem, Winning Colors, 1988. I am born in the season of color blocking and crack, in the dawn of the Reagan era. The light and dark shades of school days dance across movie screens. A girl horse wins the garland of roses. 554 blooms sprout red around her roan neck, shock of Black mane, haze of white down her nose. Before her, only 2 fillies clutch the purse. Regret in 1915, genuine risk in 1980 are names for girls. When my birth horse sets off out of the gate, a man and woman are working their 11th hour, twirling around the country club in the graceful choreography of weathered servers. The woman, just 12 weeks pregnant, not yet swollen with her dark choice, the man taking bets and slurs alike out of the mouths of the club's members, rich and red-faced from mint juleps. When the woman hands off dirty glassware to the man, father of her child, she giggles, smacks him on his great Black ass. When the girl comes down the last stretch, she's been out in front, the whole race, full of Cairo, violencing the dirt. Expectations stamped into bets, at one point her odds, 100 to 1. When her neck clears the wire into the known world, the dark trumpet sounds. But growing up across the street, you would know this if you watched the ceremonies, of course, on TV, or if you went to the races. I've never been on Derby, but hearing before there was the internet, you just hear the ceremonies, which actually reminds me of Summer's poem today. Summer writes this poem sort of from the perspective of hearing without being able to see, getting to know something through sound without being able to see it. And that's kind of like what growing up working class outside of the racetrack was like you never went, you just kind of learned the ceremony through sound. And so the trumpet, of course, always signals the start of the race, and it's a very distinct sound. Let's do Derby then. That's in conversation with that. Derby. First Saturday in May, my mother wrestles my hair into 2 ponytails. The only day of the year she bothers. The upsweep of skin pulls my face into a grin. Special occasion barrettes molded into the white plastic body of a horse gallop behind me at the tip of my braids as I race the stretch of our narrow alley street, shouting into the mirrored windows through cartoon-sized teeth, "Park here, $10. 8 years old, and I am a professional. Up early to greet the regulars, Mr. Whitlock, black Lincoln Town Car, Mr. Crouch, red topless Corvette. I usher the expensive machines into the VIP spaces of our carport, pander through the heavy hands dropped on my freshly parted scalp. All day long, up and down Cliff Avenue, I am my mother's gimmick. Reeling in the big betters, picking the sure horse, giving directions to the entrance in my tiny voice, selling plots of our yard and lemonade to orange tinted men sweating through linen, their nameless women under gaudy hats. We memorized their faces from scratchy lawn chairs beneath a mellow blimp humming through the sky. Then the streets empty. The announcer's voice echoes, blankets our roofs, a distant Oz. Grills warming, beers hissing, crowd buzzing like a radio between stations. We wait for the racists to let out, for our customers to stumble back from that fortress we've never been inside. We argue garage to garage, place the real bet. Which of us will be the first to go? My father teaches me how to slip away, with Clarence Carter on in the background. And there I sit in my mother's white Plymouth, stolen in the open under advisement of this country's laws and customs. I wait beneath the Hollywood videos, fanatic purple lights, their appliance buzz, sound of the spectral past crackling in and out. I wait for my mother to return, to go back to the only home I've ever known, but inside, she's been stunned still at the sight of my father, possibly a mirage. I must have been asking for him, begging, but she had no address, no number to call. This moment, pure chance, a warp in the spinning wax come back around, her mind skipping as she stands before him with West Side Story in hand, then speaks finally to tell him I am out in the car. And that night, my father will tell his wife I exist. And that night, he'll make it to my grandfather's house with this declaration on his lips. He'll try even again after being turned away for 7 years by a many-chambered gun. And this time, when he arrives, somehow, my mother knows he is there waiting in the outer space air of October. This time, a window is open and ash is falling from his cigarette behind the barbecue pit where he crouches just as the nightmare curls back from my skin like smoke. This time, my grandfather is unaware, bound to his makeshift couch bed by malignancy, when my mother pulls me through the cone of light cast from his living room and toward my Black life. When we steal past the safe that holds the revolver wrapped in a tea towel, my free fist turns like a wrench in my eye, and then the heavy oak door whispered open by the sparkle of my father's knuckles. And then my mother pushing me onto the night porch saying, "Your father, this is your father." Before me, a mirror. My horse mind flickers. When I step into him and look back at my mother, she is on the other side. This next poem is an abecedarian, which for those who aren't familiar with the form is, it just means that each line begins with a successive letter of the alphabet, so from A to Z. And this is abecedarian for Alzheimer's. Angel was my papa's girlfriend when he died. Back there in my memory, I hear my mother fussing about condoms and AIDS, she is saying. The girl is only 25 and Black. My daddy, amused at the irony of racism, whispering to me, he's at his end anyway. Angel was stripping at Deja Vu when he moved her into the front bedroom, and this is where I began to realize what precisely was going on. He couldn't remember me, but by then he was forgetting who he was too. Outside the club next to our world famous horse racing track, the infamous sign read, "Win Play Show Bar, 99 pretty girls." and one ugly one. A jab at Angel, their only dark-skinned dancer. She mystified them with her kaleidoscope of color contacts and quick weaves. They loved her equine legs. I loved her for telling my secret loud, for making a messy joke of him and my mother the way I felt they had made a mess of me. After Angel moved in, I never saw him again. My mother avoided his street. She could not get over the hypocrisy, how he disowned her when I was born, then made her promise not to speak of my Blackness, my father, to me. Buried whole of quiet lies they dug for years before it opened beneath the two of us and ruined everything. Maybe my mother envied Angel because she saw the truth of him out. And when he began forgetting to hate us, to put his white hood on every day, Angel used him the proper way. I like to think of her as Veritas, the goddess at the bottom of that empty well, naked and holding a hand mirror. Or maybe it was me, a xeric unblooming thing down there beneath them. I had, for years, been taught to live that way, Black, unassuming, zipped up in history, a disease not even progress can cure. All right, so this next poem is also a poem that's a part of a series in the book that goes, My Father Teaches Me. So there are four of them, each of them start that way. My Father Teaches Me. I read My Father Teaches Me How to Slip Away. This is My Father Teaches Me About the Bees, and I'm just gonna kind of use it as a transition poem into the latter half that I was talking about. I'm gonna look at some of your comments though. What are you guys saying here? Oh, Resonances of Nikki Finney. That's my teacher. Thank you. My father teaches me about the bees. My father teaches me about the bees before the scientists do. Our backyard is his armchair. He rises from the buried roots and tomato vines to come see about me, to come see about us. Me running, my honey dark baby sister who I've just caught stick poking a hive stuck to the side of our house, tangled in my arms. He sees the world in us, knows the huge abstract names for emotions when it comes to plants, but not his own self. He stops me, spins me nose to nose with him. Our top lips beaded with sweat, says, what is it? Bees, I squeak, bees. His eyes erupt, twin wildfires. Don't you know I am a bee? You, a bee. Today on a podcast, the entomologist says honeybees are actually an invasive species in the sense they don't belong here, imported by early European settlers. And as he continues talking about our solitary American honeybee species brought over for their weight in gold, I want to hug my father, put an ear to his hive chest heart buzz. Whole ecosystems built through our long blood. I want to listen before it's too late. Remember always what he said that day. Don't teach your sister to fear the bee. How much fear sounded like destroy. So I'm gonna jump to the third section and just kind of following the idea of like fear in our larger society, because even though this is it's a story about a Kentucky family, or a specific story about a Kentucky family, it's also an American story, and I also wanted it to have larger resonances. And while it's a Louisville book or a Kentucky book, it's not only that. And I think that's just important to say. So, do I want to read that poem still? Okay, Ghost Ride. So Ghost Ride is, I think I have a friend in here from the Bay, yeah. Ghost Ride, I always feel weird when I explain this to people that are like from the Bay Area, but from my perspective as a young person growing up in Kentucky, especially in Louisville, which had a thriving car culture, we hopped on any like trend that had to do with cars. So Ghost Ride is a term that describes a phenomenon out of the Bay Area. You know, I don't really know what era. I think I became aware of it in the aughts. But it's when you you get out of your car while it's still in motion, and you dance alongside of it, or around it, or over it, and it becomes this like stylistic thing for dancers, but also you know, people with like old school, people with certain kinds of cars. So I did this when I was younger, and I was like, I'm gonna write a poem about this because I live to tell about it. Ghost Ride. I don't mean the midnights I steal at 15, floating air and fuel down Dixie Highway under the street lamps orbed glare, invisible after I slip my 1988 Cutlass Supreme Classic from my father's driveway. And this isn't code between my phantom love and I for when we meet in a shadow near the downs and I vanish behind a legal tent. I don't mean the dips we take, the smoke and twisted wisps, hovering near quiet lips, sheets of white brick beneath the floorboard. Nor the time we get lost and disappear into the dark part of morning, hours cuffed on a curb for refusing to let them search our bodies for a wickedness that isn't there. How they came and went that time, unable to touch us like unclean beings wandered into the wrong realm. A girl I can't remember is what I mean. Look, me behind the wheel in a brown boy's radiant procession of candy paint. Each one the same age then as his ghost now. My baby cousin, a reckless angel next to me going dumb shotgun on the bench seat of my Oldsmobile when he still had teeth in his head, still had yet to touch flame to the underbelly of a spoon. With my boys, my sex became neutral, a gear I shifted into before throwing open the long coupe door, swinging my legs to place both feet on the risk of pavement, West Coast sound bubbling into a night otherwise country and silent, save the slow crunch of tire. I mean, I had to get out, leave the whip with no direction. This next poem, I told one of the students from this morning that I would read because I suggested that their poem would be a great contrapuntal. And so not too many people had heard of the poem, so I said that I would read mine. I normally don't read this poem at all because it started to be commodified in ways that made me really uncomfortable. It's an older poem. You'll know when you recognize the subject matter, but it's one of the older poems in the book. So, but a contrapuntal is a poem that reads down the left side and down the right, and mine also reads across. It's kind of like a contrapuntal hinge hybrid, but you know, the idea is that there's two voices, two competing voices, or some sort of duality and that sort of thing. So No Country for Black Boys. When walking while Black from a 7-Eleven, conceal your watermelon Arizona fruit juice. No sudden movements like, say, reaching for a pack of Skittles. You might end up wrestling for the right to live. You be second-class citizen unarmed. 3 weeks 17, fight, howl for help in your home. Heart suspended over a hollow point. Remember to call out a mother's name. They don't know your screams apart from man with gun. He is the one who survives in America. I am always there. I patrol. I follow, dark skin in a hoodie. I leave my vehicle, come after you trying to get away. I neighborhood watch. Like a suburb with color rushing in, your life has low value, boy. Parade around here like that, like you are only victim, Plead for help in your savage life. Get trial and conviction on my Florida sidewalk. Remember me, pain, die with only a ghetto heart. How does it feel? Listening to your body expire. These assholes always get away, but I am the one who survives in America. When walking while Black, I'm always there. I patrol, I follow from a 7-Eleven. Conceal your dark skin in a hoodie. Watermelon, Arizona fruit juice, I leave my vehicle, come after you. No sudden movements like, say, trying to get away, I neighborhood watch. Reaching for a pack of Skittles like a suburb with color rushing in, you might end up wrestling for your life has low value, boy. The right to live, you parade around here, be second-class citizen unarmed like that, like you are only 3 weeks 17. Fight, how victim, plead for help in your home, heart, savage life. Get trial and conviction suspended over a hollow point on my Florida sidewalk. Remember me. Remember to call out a mother's pain, die with only a ghetto name. They don't know heart. How does it feel? Listening to your screams apart from your body expire. These assholes, man with gun, he is the one who always get away. But I am the one who survives in America. Okay, I'm gonna do one more. I was gonna do 2 more, but I think I'm beyond 20 minutes. So I'll do, okay, I'll do 2 then, because I want to do both of them. I want to read this poem for Ania. It's just a kind of like it's a tour through Louisville, but I wrote it after Robert Frost's directive. You know, the speaker is this man walking through the, you know, this more like rural pastoral space. And the speaker of this poem is driving through, as my title continues to suggest, the relevance of cars, driving through this urban sort of space. But Louisville is, I always think of it as this urban, this mashup of the urban and the pastoral. So Drift, after Robert Frost's directive. Also, I also like want to emphasize the way the titles are in conversation, like drift versus directive. Drift. It becomes too much for us, so we take a dip. Ride aimless down this parkway, parting unruly brush. Nature, so heavy it feels at any moment, ready to erupt and absorb this silly city men have made. We are magnificent. And overhead, the trees crowd like a mob into canopy. The butt of his box Chevy sways across double yellow bars, eroded lanes cutting east to west on our side of the city, Beach and Cypress, 22nd and 18th, where it turns into Dixie. Past Park Hill's dual yellow brick, its clotheslines and identical yards, building after numbered building crossing the glass globe of my eye. Past the hair store, Grand Market, the apartments where my father lived when I met him, in the loud teal awning of Shark's Fishing Chicken. I sit shotgun sand seatbelt, tonight not gutted, that tell for fear. Maniac leant behind the wheel, eyes nearly closed, in his gut a fistful of pills. Tiny yellow footballs. Before he slams into that giant pin oak down the parkway, before the steam and the rust flakes floating through the one beam of that insistent headlight, that street lamp giving up to the dark, something telling me to get out. When I leave his gray caprice, I step out of a dimension, a place in my youth I can't return to. How quick the fire turns to ash as I hand the smoke to him. He is pulling away, the cigarillo slipping through his dangled fingers to join the ground. Like every ending thing he's done, enough to escape our streets, numbered or named for the trees. I meant to say also that the tour is down this parkway, which is Algonquin Parkway, which is the parkway that connects. Louisville is a city of parkways. It was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who also designed Central Park and the Capitol ground, the US Capitol grounds. But the parkways connected these, in the early 20th century, I believe these major suburbs, residential areas. But the Algonquin Parkway specifically now connects the Churchill Downs sort of area. It terminates there, but it connects it to West Louisville to Black Louisville. And it intersects 18th Street. It's right where 18th Street ends and Dixie Highway begins. So it's really fundamental to the book, pivotal to the book and the way it transitioned across space. The last poem I want to do is the last poem in the book, Pegasus. Before I leave for good, I lift the pie server a final time, drop the receipt face down next to the lemon blueberry slice, then my apron in the parking lot like a betting ticket. There, a horse greets me, but I see it's only a Gallapalooza, stationary as all the others scattered across the city. I move on, can't go home. So I disrobe in a stranger's yard, wash the batter away with a garden hose, then ride the night buses like a carousel. Static girl, moving room of mirrors, still blue boats streaking the dark there, and then not a stream of atoms being pulled from my cheek. I'm splitting, I'm coming apart, I'm leaving and being left, looking for you in all your haunts. Until I realize I will find you at one of my own. In the long field, synced lightning bugs near their show's climax. In the brief flashes of cold light, a glimpse of your coat, black as flight. When they move on, it's just us, 6 legs to the ground, still as statues touching flat the bridge of our noses. When you release your wings, they swing wide as a gate, and the air lifts the snakes from my shoulders. Thank you all so very much. And of course, like, if you have any questions, I'm here to stick around and hang out.
I'm going to hop in and just thank you so much. Those were amazing, and you read so powerfully. I'm really, really glad to have you here today. Please do ask questions. You can do that directly. Just unmic yourself and you can talk to Joy. I'll also keep an eye on the chat, so if questions come up there, I can share them too or point them out.
Okay. There's so many messages.
Right now, it's mostly thanks and yay. So-
I have a question. And I guess it's more of a kind of philosophical in the time of COVID sort of question. I'm not a poet, but I am so struck by your attention to the specificity of place and, being from a place. And then of course, being an academic who is removed from that place now in Houston. And I think a lot of us who live an academic life, are removed from the places of our origin. And we always kind of count on being able to go back to them and check in with them, but not being able to travel during the pandemic, I find myself having these like flashes of very specific memories of where I grew up or other places that have been meaningful to me in the past. And I guess I just wanted to invite you to see if you feel like the particular experience of being on lockdown or self-isolation, or at least just not traveling very far, how that has connected to your process of thinking about place and memory.
So I left Kentucky when I was 26, which was several years ago. So I haven't really been in that space in a long-term way, aside from just visiting for a long time, and I haven't really been able to write place anywhere else. I mean, people keep like, that's like the number one question I get about this book is place, and I kind of don't know how to answer it. I'm like, what else what other kind of poetry is there, like, but I don't know if I could write another place book that's not about Louisville or that's not about Kentucky. I just feel like the geography of a city means everything to me personally, because of the racial, because of race, because of my personal story, the chasm between my family, between me and my father. So the geography is very much a part of that personal story. and I just don't feel, I mean, and then of course, growing up from across the street from Churchill Downs, like who grows up across the street from a stable that at any time has hundreds of horses, you know, in the middle of the city. So it's like, there's, you know, I don't really have a connection to anywhere else like that. I've lived in New York City, I've lived in South Carolina, and now I live in Houston. Oh, I lived in Provincetown for last year. You know, I think place creeps in subtly and in details, but it's not the same as like, you know, the enterprise of this book. But I think if I want anyone to take away anything about place, I've been trying to think about a better answer to that question. It would be that place and the segregated geography of Louisville is like essential to the story of the speaker. I hope that.
Joy, may I ask? I'm not going to put my camera on. I prefer not. But most of my African American students come from Louisville, and I teach quite a few because I teach also in African American studies, and so I thought I knew Louisville because I used to go all the time when I was at UK for my PhD. I would go with friends, but I was going with a particular race group without realizing it, and class group without realizing it, because we were all sort of queer identified, which meant we were not in particular spaces. So I knew 4th Street Live, Churchill Downs, etc. So when I would talk to my students about it, in particular my African-American students, they would say to me, when did you go to Louisville? Like they were sort of confused by me. They said, I don't know what Louisville you're speaking of. And then they would tell me what I didn't know. And so I love that your book really showcases that the expanse, that is this experience of Louisville for Black and Black identified women in particular. Yeah.
It really is, I don't say it's to be dramatic, but it's two different cities. There's a book that a scholar at U of L, I mean, probably the premier Black scholar of Louisville who passed away, Dr. Hudson, a few years ago, like a Tale of Two Cities, you know, is the name of the book. And it's really because, you know, you have the nice, I wrote an essay about this that came out in the Bitter Southerner recently, if you're interested in a more in-depth historical, you know, account. But because I write in all genres about the city. And in the essay, I'm talking about the 9th Street Divide, which is sort of this you have like 18th Street, which is like a huge thoroughfare, but you also have the 9th Street Divide, which separates downtown Louisville and the sort of like now would be like the touristy or downtown 4th Street Live and all that stuff is, though back in the day it was the Galleria, from West Louisville, which starts around like 10th Street. Right there on 12th Street is Louisville Central High School, where I went to high school. Muhammad Ali went to high school, the all-Black high school, and then for 40 blocks, it's Black Louisville, you know. And there are no sit-down restaurants, there are no hospitals, there are no movie theaters, there are no shopping districts. There's one major grocery store. 30% of the residents don't own a car. So the only reason that they would be downtown is to go to work, you know. So it really is like not, I mean, there's a dress code at 4th Street Live. There was a controversy about this for many years. So it really is two separate cities. And I think the districts that Louisville is now in the recent years become very famous for, in terms of like tourist destination, which I remember in 2013, it was like #1 summer tourist destination. And I was like, but what, you know? But it's because of these particular districts, and they feel very inaccessible to certain parts and people of the city. Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Hobson.
I shared I think this is the one that you're talking about. I feel most Southern in the hip hop of my, yeah. So that link is in the chat.
I don't know if there were any questions in here, but yeah.
Joy, I'm gonna alter my camera on because I feel weird talking without my face talking to you. And it must be strange. I really appreciate your your engagement during all of this, because I know it must be hard when you're talking to a bunch of like static screens and so on. You can't see people's facial reactions, all that kind of thing. It's a little bit strange, but yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of what Cheryl said. This is really such a powerful book in the way that it weaves in so much about that city. And I'm not speaking as somebody who's super familiar with Louisville. I am from the Bay Area, by the way. But just thinking about the way that you're taking the icon of the horse racing, and that iconic element, and then weaving all of this in. I'm a real sucker for metaphors that get threaded throughout. And I just was always so delighted by each time that picks up, right, and carries us through. So not a question, just a thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, two Bay Area people then, so you know what I was talking about.
Yep.
Are you talking about the title as a metaphor, or?
Well, I mean, so there's horsepower, there's the horses themselves, and then there's the horsepower of the motors, the cars. There's the connections that you feel with the horses, and we're using that metaphor to speak about your own experiences as a Black woman in Louisville. And then as that, kind of still carries through, it seems like you've got this lovely arc, right, where it's the animal horsepower and then the car horsepower, and then it continues moving through. And I just, yeah, I really, really loved it.
I was also thinking about horsepower, like I was also thinking about industry as a connection to working class.
Yep.
Working class, and because I think a lot of times when people talk about Southern identity, like that's what I'm thinking about, are these like, I don't know, like of course not everyone in the South is working class, but like for me, Southern identity feels very drawn up around these like working class markers and industry and like these old school motor, like these muscle cars and that sort of culture. So thank you for that. I was also thinking about mental fortitude.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments for Joy? Cheryl's bringing up Rhonda J. Armstrong.
Oh, Susan Laurie Parks. I have a poem in the book, Girl 6, after her. Spike Lee directed the film in 1996, but she was the screenplay writer, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. Excellent.
I know there's a screenwriting professor in here. I wanted to write a film, like I wanted to be a screenwriter, but that's so much harder.
Well, it's never too late.
Maybe, it'll inspire you to write about film, but maybe an opportunity will arise. I have screenplays that are just sitting in folders. So,
well, brush them off. I'd love to read
it out there, because you gotta speak it out loud.
Yeah,
you never know the Zoom room.
Thank you so much for being here today. By the way, as people are saying in the comments, it really has been absolutely wonderful, and this is always an important event. But I think having you here has been just beyond what we had hoped for this year and any year.
Thank you. I'm so glad. This is like I don't know what number. I'm probably in the 50s or 60s in number of readings I've done. So I'm trying to keep the energy fresh every time. And I'm just really honored to be here. This was a really important one for me.
You're doing great. Thank you.
What inspired you to write? Hi, Cameron. What inspired you to write about film and poetry? Man, I just love film, and so I couldn't be a screenwriter. So I was like, I'm gonna write screenplays as poems. But no, but I really, okay. Oh, just to submit to competitions. Okay, I'll look into that. So I really got into the ekphrasis form, which is like, writing, making a piece of art based on another piece of art. And I really just honestly think we're artists, and there's just like one art we do more than anything else. And it's this, whatever we put more time into is what we end up being. And that's really why I'm a poet, not a screenwriter, honestly. But I want to be a screenwriter too. But I think with poetry, I can engage all those other forms of art. Do I? I can engage all those other forms of art as a poet. And film, I don't know, film is such a rich visual well. I think in the specifically the poems in the book that I went with, because there are more filmic facets that didn't make it into the book, I was thinking, because this is a story about Black girlhood and it's a cinematic escape narrative, as I describe it, I was thinking about movies that followed that. So all of the films that I addressed in the book were, they had a Black female protagonist, and there was some kind of like rebellious or escape kind of energy around it. And so they helped to move the arc of the book forward. Yeah, I think the true answer is I really like film. I was really into it. I used to work at the Kentucky Theater. So I worked at the Kentucky Theater for several years. And so I would just, I was like following every film that came out. I would see it like before anyone else. And of course, the Kentucky Theater only has 2 theaters, and they show like indie art house films. Usually, Fred, who runs it, Fred Mills, is like been working there since the 60s, and so he knows what's going to win an Oscar, and he shows like, what's projected to win the Oscar. So I was really into film. I was working at the theater. I wanted to be a screenwriter, and so somehow that just made it into the poetry. Okay, send the screenplays. All right. I right now I have a psychological horror about Lexington, because while I was living downtown Lexington, I discovered these tunnels in this old like antebellum era house that I lived in. And the historian that I was archiving for, Miss Yvonne Giles, at the African American Cemetery, because I was like, oh, is this the Underground Railroad? And she was like, no, this is because Lexington was a polite society, and you didn't walk your slaves above ground, so they led them to the town square through these tunnels. So I wrote like, that's one of the ones I have, is like the psychological horror, but I'll send some stuff to y'all. There's a powerful visual element to your poetry. I can see it as a film. I don't know if there were any other questions. I don't think I missed anything in there.
No, I think you got them all.
Okay. I worry I'm talking too much.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. One of the things that I was thinking, for all of the disadvantages of being in a virtual space, there's a level of intimacy in this, which makes it really, really even more powerful and special. So I'm so glad that we were able to have you here with us and doing this. There are no other questions for Joy. I want to thanks again to you for working with our students this morning with the work in the workshop, for helping foster them and their poetry, for being here with us this afternoon and sharing some of your poetry with us. And that reminds me, I want to put the link to the publisher in there again, so folks can have that. Some other thanks to the creative writing faculty for helping organize this event, particularly Trish Jaggers for helping design the poster for us, Cheryl Hobson and Tom Hunley for liaising with Joy, and Tom for helping organize some of the logistics of the workshop, David Lenore for organizing the writing contest. As always, I don't think that they're here today, but Mary Johnson and Kimberly Nestler are office associates who really are the glue that keeps everything together. And without them, I would have come undone. So thank you again. We hope that everyone will join us in person next year when we can gather and mingle over sips and nibbles. And I invite everybody to raise a martini or other beverage of your choice to Mary Ellen. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. And thank you so much, Joy.
Thank you all so much.
So we will go ahead and wrap up. I'm gonna